The gunshot echoed across the Montana Valley like thunder trapped between mountains. Noah Hayes bolted upright in bed, his nightshirt soaked with sweat, heart hammering against his ribs. For a moment, he was back in the field hospital at Gettysburg, hands slick with blood, the screams of dying men filling his ears, the acrid smell of gunpowder and rot suffocating him. Then reality seeped in the wooden walls of his isolated farmhouse, moonlight spilling across the rough floorboards, the distant howl of a wolf. 5 years since the war had ended. 5 years since he'd buried his medical bag along with the last of his faith. Noah's hand moved reflexively to the brass key hanging from a leather cord around his neck. The metal was warm against his skin, a constant reminder of a promise broken, a brother lost. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed, bare feet connecting with the cold floor. No sense trying to sleep now. The dreams always left him more exhausted than restful. He moved to the window, the glass reflecting his haggard face, dark hair streaked prematurely with silver at the temples, beard, unkempt eyes haunted by ghosts only he could see. Outside, the Montana Territory stretched vast and indifferent beneath the October moon. Rolling hills disappeared into darkness, broken only by the silhouette of the abandoned church perched on the ridge. Noah had never set foot inside that church in the 3 years he'd owned this land. Some wounds ran too deep for prayer to touch. A sound cut through the silence, not from his nightmares this time. Real. Movement outside. Noah reached for the Winchester rifle propped against his nightstand, the wood cool and familiar against his calloused palm. 8 years of war had taught him to move through darkness like it was a second skin. The floorboards on the porch creaked beneath his weight. The night air carried the scent of pine and coming snow. Then he saw them, two figures moving frantically across the open field beyond his fence line. A woman, hair wild in the moonlight, dragging a small child by the hand. Behind them, voices called out, distant but closing. Noah's jaw tightened. He'd left civilization behind to avoid precisely this other people's troubles. Yet something in the woman's desperate movements stirred something he'd thought long dead. Without thinking, he raised his rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. The sound cracked across the valley. "Here," he called, his voice rough from disuse. "This way." The woman's head snapped toward him. Even in the darkness, he could see the fear in her eyes, not of him, but of whatever followed. She changed course, half dragging the child toward his porch. As they drew closer, Noah could see blood staining the woman's dress, the exhaustion in her staggering gait. "Please," she gasped as she reached the bottom of his porch steps. "They'll kill us." The child beside her, a girl no older than 7, stood silent, eyes wide and unblinking in the moonlight. She clutched a worn rag doll to her chest, her knuckles white with the effort. Noah hesitated only a moment before stepping aside, gesturing them into his home with a curt nod. As they passed, the scent of fear and blood filled his nostrils, all too familiar. "Who's after you?" he asked, scanning the darkness beyond his property. The woman didn't answer, collapsing against his kitchen table, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The child remained standing, watching Noah with eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Doesn't matter," Noah muttered, more to himself than to them. He closed the door, sliding the heavy wooden bolt into place. "You can stay till morning, then you go." The woman nodded weakly, her hand still gripping the child's as if afraid she might disappear. Noah lit a lamp, the golden glow illuminating the strangers properly for the first time. The woman was younger than he'd initially thought, mid-30s, perhaps, with dark hair that might have been beautiful if not matted with sweat and dirt. Her face was a canvas of bruises in various stages of healing, a deep gash along her hairline. But it was her eyes that caught Noah Hazel, and clear-filled, not just with fear, but with a determination that reminded him of soldiers who refused to die despite their wounds. "You're bleeding," he said flatly, nodding to her shoulder where her dress was torn and dark with blood. "It's nothing," she whispered, but her pallor said otherwise. Noah hesitated. He hadn't tended wounds since the war hadn't wanted to. But the woman was swaying on her feet, and whatever was hunting them wouldn't be deterred long by a single warning shot. "Sit," he commanded, pulling out a chair. To the child he added, "There's water in that bucket. Bring it here." To his surprise, a little girl obeyed immediately, dragging the heavy wooden bucket across the floor without a word. Her movements were practiced, as if caring for injured adults was nothing new to her. "I need to look at that wound," Noah told the woman. "It'll need cleaning." She nodded, wincing as she tried to remove her shawl. Noah stepped forward to help, noticing how she flinched at his approach. He moved slower, then gentler, the way he used to approach wounded horses on his father's farm a lifetime ago. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to distract her as he examined the wound. "Sarah," she said after a moment's hesitation. "Sarah Miller. This is my daughter, Emma." Noah glanced at the child who hadn't spoken a word. She was small for her age with her mother's dark hair and solemn eyes. She watched his every move with unnerving intensity. "Noah Hayes," he offered in return, turning his attention back to Sarah's shoulder. The wound was deep, a knife slash from the look of it, but clean. It would need stitches. As he cleaned the wound, Noah noticed something beneath the torn fabric, a small tattoo on Sarah's upper shoulder, a cross inverted, surrounded by strange symbols. He frowned but said nothing, focusing instead on the task at hand. "This will hurt," he warned as he threaded a needle. The irony wasn't lost on him, the man who'd fled from medicine performing surgery in his kitchen by lamplight. Sarah didn't cry out when the needle pierced her skin. She sat, rigid eyes fixed on the wall, only the whitening of her knuckles betraying her pain. Emma stood beside her mother, small hand resting on Sarah's arm, silent comfort in her touch. "You have steady hands," Sarah observed, her voice tight. "Like a doctor." Noah's movements faltered for just a moment. "I was, once, during the war." He nodded, not elaborating. The less they knew about him, the better. Morning would come, and they would leave, taking their troubles with them. That was the agreement. When he finished, Noah wrapped her shoulder in clean linen, torn from an old shirt. "It'll hold," he said, stepping back. "You need rest." Sarah's eyes darted to the door, then back to him. "We can't stay," she whispered, though exhaustion was written in every line of her body. "They'll come, they always do." "Who?" Noah pressed his patience wearing thin. "Who's after you?" Sarah hesitated, glancing at her daughter. Emma had finally sat down, her small body drooping with fatigue, though her eyes remained alert. "My father-in-law," Sarah finally said, her voice barely audible, "and his congregation." Something in the way she said the word made Noah's skin crawl. He'd heard that tone before in the voices of men describing battlefields too horrific for words. "We just need somewhere safe for tonight," Sarah continued. "Please. By morning we'll be gone." Noah should have said no. Should have insisted they leave at first light. Instead, he found himself nodding toward the small bedroom off the kitchen, his mother's room untouched since her passing years ago. "You can sleep there. Lock the door if it makes you feel safer." Relief washed over Sarah's face, the first genuine emotion he'd seen beyond fear. "Thank you," she whispered. "We won't be trouble." Noah grunted, already regretting his decision. "See that you aren't." As Sarah gathered her exhausted daughter, Noah returned to the porch, rifle in hand. The night had grown quiet again. Too quiet. Whatever pursuers had been calling out earlier had fallen silent, but that didn't mean they'd given up the hunt. He settled into the rocking chair, rifle across his lap, and prepared for a long night. Above him, the stars wheeled slowly through the vast Montana sky. In the distance, the abandoned church stood sentinel on the ridge, its broken steeple a dark finger pointing accusingly at heaven. Noah touched the brass key hanging from the leather cord around his neck, his own private reminder of sins that could never be washed clean. The next morning dawned, cold and clear sunlight spilling across the kitchen table where Noah sat nursing a cup of bitter coffee. He'd slept little, keeping watch through the night, but no danger had materialized. Perhaps the woman's pursuers had lost her trail in the darkness. Perhaps the warning shot had discouraged them. Either way, she and her daughter would be leaving soon, and his life would return to its solitary rhythm. A soft knock on the back door interrupted his thoughts. Rifle in hand, Noah moved cautiously through the kitchen. Only a handful of people knew about the small cabin hidden in the trees behind his property. Fewer still would approach it directly. "Who's there?" he called through the door. "It's me, Dr. Hayes, Martha Jenkins." Noah relaxed slightly, recognizing the voice of the widow who lived 3 miles down the valley. He unbolted the door to reveal a stout woman in her 50s, her gray hair escaping from a sensible bun, a covered basket in her hands. "Mrs. Jenkins," he nodded. "Is someone hurt?" "No, no," she assured him, stepping inside without invitation. Martha Jenkins had been bringing him food and checking on his welfare since he'd purchased the property, undeterred by his attempts to discourage her. "Just bringing some fresh bread and jam. Thought you might appreciate something besides your own cooking." Her eyes narrowed as she took in his haggard appearance. "You look terrible. Nightmares again." Noah didn't answer, taking the basket and setting it on the table. Martha was one of the few people who knew he'd been a doctor during the war, though he'd never shared the details of what he'd seen or done. "I appreciate the bread," he said, hoping to hurry her along before she discovered his guess. "But I have a Dr. Hayes," Sarah's voice came from the doorway of the bedroom. She stood there, Emma half hidden behind her skirts, both looking rumpled from sleep, but less desperate than the night before. "I'm sorry I didn't realize you had company." Martha's eyebrows shot up, her gaze moving from Sarah to Noah and back again. "Well," she said, a smile spreading across her face, "I didn't realize you had company either, Dr. Hayes." Noah scowled. "It's not what you're thinking. Mrs. Miller and her daughter needed shelter for the night. They'll be leaving this morning." "Actually," Martha said, her expression turning serious as she took in Sarah's bruised face and bandaged shoulder, "I think they should stay a while longer. Those injuries need time to heal properly." Before Noah could protest, Martha had crossed to Sarah, introducing herself and coaxing both mother and daughter to the table. Within minutes, she'd cut thick slices of still warm bread, slathered them with berry jam, and set them before Emma, whose eyes widened at the treat. "You should eat too," Martha told Sarah gently. "Healing takes strength." Noah watched with growing irritation as Martha commandeered his kitchen, his privacy invaded not just by the strangers he'd reluctantly sheltered, but by this well-meaning neighbor who seemed determined to extend their stay. "Mrs. Jenkins," he began, "I appreciate your concern, but—" "Oh," Martha exclaimed, ignoring him completely as she noticed something by the stove. "You still have that broth I brought last week, perfect for someone recovering from injury." She turned to Sarah. "He hasn't eaten it because he's stubborn as a mule, but it'll do you good." Sarah offered a small smile, the first Noah had seen from her. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. You're very kind." "Martha, please," the older woman insisted, "and you'll stay as long as you need to heal. Dr. Hayes may act the bear, but he won't turn away someone in need, not in his nature despite his best efforts." Noah opened his mouth to contradict her, then closed it again. There was little point arguing with Martha Jenkins once she'd made up her mind. Besides, something else had caught his attention, a movement through the window, a figure slipping between the trees at the edge of his property. "Excuse me," he said abruptly, grabbing his rifle and heading for the door. "Noah," Martha called after him, concern in her voice. "Stay inside," he ordered. "Keep the door locked." Outside, the morning air was crisp with the promise of winter. Noah moved along the edge of his house, rifle-ready eyes scanning the tree line. There, a flash of dark clothing, a deliberate movement too large to be an animal. Someone was watching his farm. Noah circled wide, using the cover of the woodshed to approach the trees from the side. Years of combat had taught him to move quietly, to use terrain to his advantage. He slipped into the forest, following the signs of recent passage, a broken twig, disturbed leaves, a boot print in soft earth. The figure had stopped in a small clearing, back to Noah, gazing toward the farmhouse through what appeared to be a spyglass. A man, tall and thin, dressed in dark clothing that wasn't quite a uniform, but had a similar formality: black coat, high collar, wide-brimmed hat. Noah raised his rifle. "Don't move." The man stiffened but didn't turn. "Dr. Hayes," he said, voice soft and cultured. "Finally we meet." "Who are you?" Noah demanded, keeping his distance. "Why are you watching my house?" "My name wouldn't mean anything to you," the man replied, "but I believe you've met my daughter-in-law and granddaughter." A chill ran down Noah's spine. This was Sarah's father-in-law, the man she was running from, the leader of the congregation she'd mentioned. "Turn around. Slowly, Biden," Noah ordered, finger steady on the trigger. The man complied, revealing a face that might have been handsome once, but had hardened into something austere and forbidding. Silver hair swept back from a high forehead, piercing blue eyes, a mouth set in a thin line. He was older than Noah had expected, 60s perhaps, but carried himself with the rigid posture of a much younger man. "Isaiah Miller," he introduced himself with a slight bow. "I must thank you for tending to Sarah's injuries. She's precious to us, to our community, as is Emma." "Precious enough that she's running for her life?" Noah asked, keeping his rifle trained on the man's chest. "That she's covered in bruises?" Isaiah's expression darkened momentarily before smoothing into something like sorrow. "Sarah is unwell, has been since my son's passing. She harms herself," Dr. Hayes imagines persecutions that don't exist. "And now she's taken Emma, filling the child's head with her delusions." Noah's eyes narrowed. The man was a skilled liar. There was just enough genuine emotion in his voice to be convincing to someone who hadn't seen Sarah's fear, the defensive wounds on her arms, the knife slash that could only have been delivered by someone else. "I'd like to speak with her," Isaiah continued, "to assure her that she's safe, that she can come home. We only want what's best for both of them. And if she doesn't want to go with you," Isaiah smiled thinly, "as I said, she's unwell, not in a position to make decisions for herself or her daughter. But I'm a patient man, Dr. Hayes. I can wait until she's ready." His gaze flicked toward the farmhouse. "Until you're ready to see reason." Noah's finger tightened on the trigger. He could end this threat now, one bullet, and Sarah and her daughter would be safe. But killing in cold blood, even to protect others, would violate the oath he'd taken as a doctor, the principles he still held to despite everything. "Get off my property," he said instead, voice hard. "Don't come back. Sarah and Emma are under my protection now." Isaiah's smile didn't waver. "You speak as if you have a choice in this matter, Dr. Hayes, as if any of us do. But we are all instruments of a higher purpose, vessels for divine will, even you." He reached into his coat and Noah tensed, ready to fire. But Isaiah merely withdrew a small, leather-bound book, holding it out. "I'll leave this for you," he said, placing the book on a fallen log. "Perhaps it will help you understand what's at stake, what Emma truly is." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing among the trees with a confidence that suggested he feared no pursuit. Noah waited until he was certain the man was gone before approaching the room and examining the book. It was a journal, the cover unmarked, save for a symbol tooled into the leather, an inverted cross surrounded by 7 stars, the same mark he'd glimpsed on Sarah's shoulder. Noah tucked the journal into his coat pocket, unsettled by the encounter. Isaiah Miller hadn't seemed like a madman or a brute. There had been something almost magnetic about him, the kind of quiet authority that draws followers and inspires devotion. That made him far more dangerous than a simple villain. When Noah returned to the house, he found Martha, Sarah, and Emma seated at the table, the remains of breakfast before them. All three looked up at his entrance, Martha with concern, Sarah with fear, and Emma with that same unnerving intensity that seemed to see through him. "Is everything all right?" Martha asked, rising from her chair. "You were gone quite a while." Noah hesitated, glancing at Emma. "Just checking the property," he said, not wanting to frighten the child further. "Everything's fine." Sarah's eyes met his, and he knew she didn't believe him. There was a wordless communication between them, a shared understanding that danger had been near. He gave her a slight nod, a promise to explain later. "Well," Martha said, wiping her hands on her apron, "I should be getting back. Mr. Peterson's cow is due to calve any day now, and he's hopeless without help." She turned to Sarah. "You'll stay and rest that shoulder, won't you, dear? At least a few days." Before Sarah could respond, Noah cut in. "That would be best. The wound needs time to heal properly." Surprise flickered across Sarah's face, quickly replaced by gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. "Just until we can travel safely." After seeing Martha out with promises to return the next day, Noah bolted the door and turned to Sarah. "Your father-in-law was here," he said without preamble, "watching the house from the woods." Sarah's face drained of color. She clutched Emma to her side as if to shield her from the very mention of the man. "What did he want?" "You," Noah replied simply. "Both of you. He claims you're unwell, delusional, that you harm yourself." A bitter laugh escaped Sarah's lips. "Of course he does. That's what he tells everyone when women try to leave the path, that we're hysterical, unstable, a danger to ourselves." Her eyes hardened. "My bruises are from his healing hands, Dr. Hayes. My shoulder from his son Joseph's knife when I refused to let them take Emma for her preparation." "Preparation for what?" Sarah's gaze dropped to Emma, who sat unnaturally still, listening to their conversation with adult comprehension. "For her role as the chosen one," she said quietly. "Isaiah believes Emma has the gift of prophecy, that she can see events before they happen, commune with the divine. He wants to use her for his own purposes." Noah's skepticism must have shown on his face, because Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "You don't have to believe in her abilities to understand she's in danger. My husband Daniel vowed during a purification ritual 6 months ago. He'd begun to question his father's teachings to shield Emma from the worst of them." Her voice broke. "They drowned him," Dr. Hayes called it cleansing, but it was murder." Noah looked at Emma, who returned his gaze steadily. There was something unsettling about the child's calm in the face of such horrors, as if she'd witnessed too much to be shocked by mere words. "Isaiah left something for you," he said, withdrawing the journal from his pocket. "Said it would help me understand what's at stake." Sarah recoiled from the book as if it were a snake. "The book of Revelations," she whispered. "His personal gospel." "Don't read it, Dr. Hayes. It poisons the mind with half-truths and twisted scripture." Noah set the journal on the table, reluctant to touch it further. "He'll be back," he said, "or he'll send others. 2 days isn't enough time for your shoulder to heal, but it might be all we have before he makes his move." "Then we should leave now," Sarah said, rising from her chair. "I won't bring danger to your door after your kindness." "And go where?" Noah challenged. "In your condition with a child in territory, you don't know he'd catch you within hours." "Then what do you suggest?" Noah ran a hand through his hair, conflicted. Every instinct told him to send them away, to return to his solitary existence, to avoid involvement in a conflict that wasn't his. Yet something about Sarah's quiet courage, about Emma's solemn eyes, about the casual cruelty of Isaiah Miller, made it impossible to turn away. "You'll stay," he decided, "at least until your shoulder heals. I have a friend in Helena who might help, a U.S. Marshal who owes me a favor. I'll send word to him." Relief and gratitude washed over Sarah's face. "Thank you," she said simply, the words containing volumes. Noah nodded awkwardly, unused to gratitude. "There's another bedroom upstairs. It's small, but it would give Emma her own space." He looked at the little girl. "Would you like that?" To his surprise, Emma nodded, the first direct response she'd given him. "Yes, please," she whispered, her voice soft but clear. "Good," Noah said, something unfamiliar warming his chest at the child's words. "Let's get you settled then." As he led them upstairs, showing them the second bedroom with its narrow bed and small window overlooking the valley, Noah found himself wondering at the strange turn his life had taken in less than 24 hours. From solitary exile to reluctant protector of a woman and child pursued by a religious zealot. The key around his neck seemed heavier suddenly, as if reminding him of the last time he'd tried to save someone from Isaiah Miller's influence. He'd failed then. Samuel had died because of that failure. Noah couldn't let it happen again, couldn't let another life be destroyed by the man's twisted faith. This time would be different. This time he wouldn't look away. In the days that followed, an uneasy routine developed at the Hayes farm. Noah reinforced doors and windows, set up alarm systems of cans and wire around the perimeter, and kept his rifle close. Sarah's shoulder began to heal, the inflammation receding, though she remained weak from blood loss and exhaustion. Emma gradually emerged from her silence, speaking in short, precise sentences that sometimes contained wisdom beyond her years. She spent hours drawing with pencil and paper Noah had found in his mother's desk, creating images that unsettled him with their detail and darkness. The abandoned church featured prominently, often engulfed in flames, dark figures with outstretched arms, and always in the foreground, a man with what appeared to be a key around his neck. Noah tried to dismiss it as coincidence. The child had seen his key, incorporated it into her artwork. But the precision of the drawings, the way they seemed to depict scenes that hadn't yet occurred, made his skin crawl. On the third morning, Noah found Sarah studying one of Emma's drawings at the kitchen table, her face pale in the early light. "She's been drawing these since we left the path," Sarah said without looking up. "They come to her in dreams, or sometimes when she's awake, but distant, like she's seeing something beyond this room, this moment." Noah sat across from her, examining the drawing. It showed the interior of the abandoned church, candles arranged in a circle, a symbol carved into what appeared to be an altar. "Has she ever been inside the church on the ridge?" he asked. Sarah shook her head. "Never. We came directly to your farm from the east. She couldn't have seen it before you took us in." "Yet she draws it in detail," Noah mused. "The broken windows, the layout of the pews." "She drew our escape 3 days before we left," Sarah said quietly. "The path through the woods, the river crossing, even your farm in the distance. I thought it was her imagination, a child's wishful thinking. But it led us straight to you." Noah didn't know how to respond. He'd seen too much in war and its aftermath to dismiss the inexplicable entirely, yet his medical training rebelled against the notion of prophecy or visions. "Whether her drawings are imagination or something more," he said finally, "they show she's deeply affected by what she's experienced. Children process trauma in different ways." Sarah's lips curved in a sad smile. "You sound like a doctor again." "Old habits," Noah admitted. Hard to break even after 5 years. Why did you stop? Sarah asked, her hazel eyes searching his face. Practicing medicine, I mean. You obviously haven't lost your skill. Noah's hand moved unconsciously to the key around his neck. I lost too many, he said simply. Made promises I couldn't keep. After a while, it seemed better not to make promises at all. Sarah nodded, understanding in her gaze. I felt that way after Daniel died. Like any promise of safety or happiness was a lie waiting to be exposed. She looked toward the window where Emma could be seen sitting on the porch steps drawing again. But then I realized the only promise that mattered was the one to keep her safe, to give her a life beyond Isaiah's control. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats approaching the farm. Noah was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, moving to the window. Stay here, he told Sarah, heading for the door. Keep Emma inside if she comes in. Outside, the autumn sun cast long shadows across the yard as a single rider approached a young man on a bay horse, moving at an unhurried pace. Noah recognized him as Jacob Wilson, the son of the blacksmith in town, a lanky youth of perhaps 18. Dr. Hayes, Jacob called, reining in his horse at a respectful distance. Got a message for you, sir. Noah lowered his rifle slightly but maintained his vigilance. From whom? Sheriff Cooper, sir, said it was urgent. The young man fumbled in his saddlebag, producing a sealed envelope. Also said to tell you he needs to speak with you in person about that matter you inquired about. Noah hadn't sent any inquiries to Sheriff Cooper, hadn't spoken to the man in months. This was either a mistake or more likely a ploy to draw him away from the farm, away from Sarah and Emma. Thank you, Jacob, he said, taking the envelope but not opening it. Tell the sheriff I'll consider his request. Jacob shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. He said it was real important, sir, about some strangers in town asking questions. Religious folk, he called them. Noah's attention sharpened. Did he describe these strangers? Not to me, sir. Just said you'd want to know they were looking for a woman and child, offering a reward for information. So Isaiah was spreading his net wider, involving the town in his search. It was only a matter of time before someone connected the stranger's arrival with the appearance of a woman and child at Noah's isolated farm. I'll ride in tomorrow, Noah decided, pressing a coin into Jacob's hand. Thank you for the delivery. After the young man departed, Noah broke the seal on the envelope and read the brief message inside. Hayes visitors in town seeking woman and child. Claim to be family, but something doesn't sit right. Leader is silver-haired preacher type named Miller. Claims the woman is unstable, dangerous to herself and the child. If you know anything about this, come see me. If you don't, ignore this message. Cooper. Noah folded the note and tucked it into his pocket, troubled by its implications. Sheriff Cooper was a straightforward lawman, not particularly imaginative or ambitious, but honest in his own way. If he was suspicious of Isaiah's story, there might be an opportunity to gain an ally. But leaving the farm meant leaving Sarah and Emma vulnerable, even if only for a few hours. Noah wasn't willing to take that risk, not yet, not until he was certain they could defend themselves in his absence. When he returned inside, he found Sarah in the kitchen, pretending to prepare vegetables for dinner, though her tense posture betrayed her concern. Was it them? She asked, setting down the knife she'd been clutching. No, Noah assured her. Just a message from the sheriff in town. Your father-in-law is there asking questions, offering rewards for information about you and Emma. Sarah's face paled. We should go. Tonight before someone tells him we're here. No one in town knows you're here except Martha Jenkins, and she wouldn't betray you, Noah said, though he wasn't entirely confident. Small towns thrived on gossip, and Martha, for all her kindness, was not immune to sharing news. Besides, you're still not strong enough to travel far, and where would you go? I don't know, Sarah admitted, slumping into a chair. I thought we'd have more time before he found us. Noah sat across from her, choosing his next words carefully. Sarah, I need to know more about Isaiah and this path of his. What exactly does he believe? Why is Emma so important to him? Sarah was silent for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the window where Emma could still be seen drawing on the porch. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, as if afraid the words themselves might summon danger. The Divine Path began as a small prayer group during the war, she said. Isaiah was a preacher then, traveling with the Confederate Army as a chaplain. But something changed him. He started having visions or claimed to prophecies about the end of days, about a new world rising from the ashes of the old. She traced a pattern on the table with her finger, unconsciously replicating the symbol Noah had seen on her shoulder. After the war, he gathered followers, lost souls looking for purpose, for meaning in all that death and destruction. He promised them salvation through obedience, through purification. At first, it was just baptisms, fasting, prayer. But gradually, the rituals grew harsher, the punishments for disobedience more severe. And your husband, Daniel, how did he fit into this? Daniel was Isaiah's second son, Sarah explained. His oldest, Joseph, embraced the path, completely became his father's enforcer. But Daniel was gentler, more questioning. He married me because his father arranged it. I was the daughter of one of Isaiah's most devoted followers. But he was kind to me, protected me when he could. Her voice caught. When Emma started showing signs of sensitivity, Isaiah became obsessed with her, called her the seventh vessel, the child who would channel divine will. Daniel tried to shield her, to convince his father that she was just an ordinary little girl. For that defiance, he was purified, held underwater until she couldn't finish. Noah's stomach turned at the image. He'd seen similar atrocities during the war, men driven to unspeakable acts by fanaticism, by the certainty that their cause justified any cruelty. And after Daniel died, he prompted gently, I was kept isolated, watched constantly. They said I needed to be prepared to guide Emma in her role. Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to her shoulder, where the mark had been burned into her skin. When I overheard Isaiah and Joseph discussing the final purification, a ritual they said would free Emma's spirit from earthly constraints, I knew we had to run. That night, while the congregation was gathered for prayer, we slipped away. Noah absorbed this information, fitting it against his own experiences with religious zealotry, with the ways faith could be twisted into a weapon. How many followers does Isaiah have? He asked, the tactical part of his mind assessing the threat. 50, perhaps 60 devoted members who live in the compound, Sarah replied. But his influence spreads further, sympathizers in towns throughout the territory, people who provide information, resources, shelter when needed. And they're all willing to help him hunt down a woman and child to participate in these purifications. Sarah's eyes met his, haunted by what she'd witnessed. Most believe they're serving God, saving souls. Others fear becoming the next sacrifice if they question or resist. And some, she hesitated, some simply enjoy the power, the permission to inflict suffering in the name of righteousness. A sound from the doorway made them both turn. Emma stood there, her latest drawing clutched in her small hand. Without a word, she crossed to the table and placed the paper before Noah. He looked down at the image and felt his blood run cold. It showed a man, unmistakably him, standing in the abandoned church. Across from him stood another figure, silver-haired and austere, Isaiah Miller. Between them lay what appeared to be a body, though the details were mercifully vague in the child's rendering. And in the background, flames began to consume the wooden walls. Emma, Noah said gently, what is this? The child's solemn eyes met his. The fire is coming, she said simply, but first the truth has to be found. Sarah pulled Emma close, a protective arm around her shoulders. It's just a drawing, sweetheart. Just imagination. But Emma shook her head, pointing to the image of Noah. He has the key, she insisted, the key to the truth. Noah's hand moved reflexively to the brass key around his neck. The key to a safety deposit box in Helena, containing documents he hadn't looked at in 5 years. Documents about Isaiah Miller and the divine path. Evidence his brother had gathered before the fire that supposedly claimed his life. How do you know about the key? He asked Emma, his voice barely above a whisper. The child's answer chilled him to the bone. The man with the sad eyes told me. He said you'd understand when it was time. What man, Emma? Sarah asked, concern sharpening her tone. When did you speak to someone? In my dreams, Emma replied with the matter-of-fact acceptance of a child. He looks like him, she pointed to Noah, but younger. He says he's waiting at the church. Noah stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I need some air, he muttered, heading for the door. Outside, the afternoon had begun to wane, shadows lengthening across the yard. Noah strode toward the barn, his mind racing with implications he didn't want to face. There was no way Emma could know about Samuel, about his connection to Isaiah Miller, about the evidence gathered before the fire that had claimed 8 lives, including his brother's. Yet the child's drawing, her mention of the man with the sad eyes, the key, it was too specific to be Coincidence too accurate to be imagination. Inside the barn, Noah moved to the back wall where loose boards concealed a small space. From it, he withdrew a wooden box dusty from years of neglect. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it, revealing contents he'd tried to forget: a photograph of two young men in uniform, himself and Samuel, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling with the naive confidence of youth. Letters from the front lines, and a journal, its pages filled with Samuel's precise handwriting. The last entry was dated one day before the fire that destroyed the gathering hall of the Divine Path, killing 8 people, including Samuel Hayes, the brother Noah had failed to protect. As Noah stared at the familiar handwriting, a memory surfaced. Samuel, feverish, with belief, eyes burning with zealot certainty the last time Noah had seen him alive. "Isaiah has received a new revelation," Samuel had told him. Voice trembling with excitement or fear, Noah couldn't tell which. "True purification requires fire, not water. The chosen ones must pass through flames to prove their worthiness." Noah had tried to reason with him, to pull him away from Isaiah's influence. They'd argued, physically fought for the only time in their lives. Samuel had left anyway, returning to the path to Isaiah to his death. Or had he? Emma's words echoed in his mind. "The man with the sad eyes told me. He says he's waiting at the church." Could it be possible? Could Samuel have survived the fire somehow? Been hiding all these years, watching, waiting? The thought was too painful to hold, too hopeful to trust. Noah closed the box, returning it to its hiding place. Whatever the truth, it was clear now that his connection to Isaiah Miller ran deeper than Sarah knew, that her arrival at his farm was perhaps not the coincidence he'd assumed. As he turned to leave the barn, something caught his eye, a movement in the shadowed corner where he kept old tack and tools. Noah reached for his knife, the only weapon he'd brought with him. "Who's there?" he demanded. "Show yourself." A figure emerged from the darkness, a woman, thin and pale, her movements hesitant. Sophia Allen, the injured nurse Noah had been caring for in secret these past months, found wandering the forest with a head wound and no memory of how she'd gotten there. "Hayes," she whispered, her voice faint. "I heard voices. A child." "Is someone here?" Noah relaxed slightly, though concern replaced his alarm. Sophia shouldn't be out of bed, let alone walking to the barn. Her injuries had been severe, a blow to the head that had left her unconscious for days, with lingering effects on her memory and coordination. "You should be resting," he said, moving to support her as she swayed on her feet. "Why did you leave the cabin?" "I had a dream," Sophia said, her eyes unfocused. "Samuel was calling to me, telling me to warn you." She clutched at his arm, suddenly her gaze sharpening. "He's coming, Dr. Hayes. He's found her, the child he's been seeking." Noah's blood ran cold. Sophia had never mentioned Samuel before, had shown no recognition when Noah occasionally spoke of his brother. Yet now she uttered his name with familiarity, with urgency. "How do you know that name?" he asked, guiding her to a hay bale where she could sit. "How do you know about Samuel?" Sophia's brow furrowed in confusion. I can't remember." The faces blur together. "But I know he tried to help me, to help all of us, before the fire." "What fire, Sophia?" Noah pressed, kneeling before her. "What can you remember?" She shook her head, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. "Just fragments, singing, prayers, a man with silver hair speaking of purification, and Samuel's voice telling me to run, to hide, that he would find me when it was safe." It couldn't be coincidence. Sophia's fragmented memories aligned too perfectly with Sarah's account of the divine path, with the fire that had supposedly claimed Samuel's life. Yet Noah had found her months ago, long before Sarah and Emma arrived at his farm. If she was connected to Isaiah Miller's cult, how had she escaped? Why had she been wandering alone in the forest with a head wound? "Sophia," Noah said gently, "I need you to try to remember more. It's important. There's a woman and child at the house who are in danger from the man with silver hair. If you know something that could help them." Sophia's eyes widened. "A child," she whispered. "A little girl. Dark hair, solemn eyes." "Yes," Noah confirmed, surprised. "Her name is Emma." "The seventh vessel," Sophia breathed, then her face contorted in pain. She pressed her hands to her temples. "It hurts to remember. They did something to me, to all of us who questioned. A ritual to cleanse doubt. Noah recognized the symptoms of traumatic memory resurfacing, had seen it in soldiers after particularly brutal battles. Pushing too hard could cause more harm than good. It's all right, he soothed. Don't force it. But Sophia, if you know something about Emma, about the danger she's in, keep her away from the church, Sophia said. Suddenly her voice stronger. That's where they perform the rituals, where they took the others before they disappeared. Her eyes met Noah's, clear and urgent. He won't stop until he has her, Dr. Hayes. Isaiah believes she's the key to everything, the vessel for his final revelation. The name confirmed Noah's suspicions. Sophia had been part of the divine path, had known Isaiah Miller, perhaps even Samuel. But how had she escaped, and why couldn't she remember? Before he could ask more questions, the sound of the dinner bell rang out from the house, Sarah calling them to the evening meal. Sophia startled at the noise, nearly falling from her seat on the hay bale. You should go back to the cabin, Noah told her, helping her stand. I'll bring food later, and we can talk more when you're stronger. Sophia nodded, her brief moment of clarity already fading. Be careful, she murmured. The path has eyes everywhere, even here. As Noah watched her make her way back to the hidden cabin in the trees, her words echoed ominously in his mind. The path has eyes everywhere. Was it possible Isaiah had infiltrated the local community more deeply than Sarah realized? That someone in town, perhaps even someone Noah considered a friend, was reporting to the charismatic cult leader? The thought made his decision clear. Tomorrow he would ride into town, speak with Sheriff Cooper, assess the threat directly. But first he needed to tell Sarah the truth about Samuel, about his connection to Isaiah Miller, about the evidence his brother had gathered before his supposed death. The key around his neck felt heavier than ever. As Noah walked back to the house where Sarah and Emma waited, unaware that their arrival had awakened ghosts, long buried, set in motion events that had been waiting 5 years to unfold. In the distance, the abandoned church stood silhouetted against the evening sky, its broken steeple, a dark finger pointing accusingly at heaven. Or perhaps Noah thought, with a chill beckoning him toward a truth he'd been avoiding since the night of the fire. A truth that might be the only thing that could save Sarah and Emma from Isaiah's obsession. The time for hiding was over. The reckoning had begun. The town of Pinewood Creek materialized from the morning mist like a mirage, its buildings clustered along the main street, as if huddling against the wilderness surrounding them. Noah rode slowly, taking in the details with the heightened awareness of a soldier entering hostile territory. A handful of people moved along the boardwalks, a woman sweeping the steps of the general store. 2 miners heading toward the saloon, a boy leading a tired mule loaded with firewood. Normal, ordinary. Yet Noah felt eyes on him, watching from behind curtained windows, from alleyways between buildings. The weight of the revolver against his ribs offered little comfort. He'd left at dawn after a tense conversation with Sarah the night before. He told her everything about Samuel, about his connection to Isaiah Miller, about the evidence his brother had gathered before the fire. So this isn't coincidence, Sarah had said, her face pale in the lamplight, that we found your farm. Emma's drawings led you here, Noah had replied. Perhaps there's a reason beyond what we understand. He hadn't mentioned Sophia or her fragmented memories. That secret he still kept, unsure how the information might affect Sarah's already fragile sense of security. Noah reined his horse outside the sheriff's office, tying it to the hitching post before checking his surroundings once more. No sign of Isaiah or his followers, though that meant little in a town this size. They could be anywhere watching, waiting. Sheriff Cooper was at his desk when Noah entered the room, smelling of coffee and gun oil. The lawman looked up from his paperwork, unsurprised. Hayes, he nodded, was wondering if you'd show. Your note said it was urgent. Noah remained standing, hat in hand, eyes assessing the sheriff's mood. They weren't friends exactly, but they'd reached an understanding over the years. Noah kept to himself. Cooper respected his privacy. Got visitors in town, Cooper said, pouring coffee into a chipped mug and sliding it across the desk. Religious folk, they call themselves. Looking for a woman and child. Offering rewards for information. Noah accepted the coffee but didn't drink. What's that got to do with me? Cooper leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing slightly. Your place is isolated, Hayes. Perfect hiding spot. And Martha Jenkins has been making extra trips out your way, carrying more food than one man could eat. Martha's always trying to fatten me up. You know how she is. I know she mentioned to my deputy that you had guests, a woman and her daughter recovering from injuries. Cooper's voice remained neutral, but his meaning was clear. The secret was already out. Noah sighed, setting down the untouched coffee. What exactly do you want, Sheriff? The truth would be a start. Cooper leaned forward. These religious folks, this path of divine revelation, or whatever they're calling themselves, they're trouble. Their leader, Miller, he's been in my office daily spinning tales about his mentally unstable daughter-in-law who kidnapped his granddaughter. Says the woman is dangerous, delusional. And you believe him, Cooper snorted. I've been a lawman for 20 years, Hayes. I know a snake oil salesman when I see one. But he's got paperwork guardianship documents for the child signed by a judge in Helena. Legal looking, at least. Noah felt cold dread settling in his stomach. Isaiah was laying groundwork to take Emma legally to use the system against them. The woman at my farm is Sarah Miller, Noah admitted finally. The child is her daughter, Emma. They were running from Isaiah Miller because he killed Sarah's husband, his own son, in some kind of ritual drowning. Now he wants the child for another ritual. Cooper's expression remained impassive, but something in his eyes shifted. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Sarah has the injuries to prove it. Knife wounds, bruises, a brand on her shoulder. Emma hasn't spoken more than a dozen words since they arrived. She draws pictures instead, dark things no child should imagine, let alone witness. The sheriff was silent for a long moment, fingers drumming on his desk. Even if I believe you, and I'm not saying I don't, those guardianship papers give Miller legal standing. I can't just ignore them. Since when do you care about paperwork from Helena? Noah challenged. This is about a child's safety. It's about doing my job without getting removed from it, Cooper countered. Miller's got connections, judge in Helena Banker in Butte. I start throwing accusations without proof, I'll be replaced before the week's out. Then where would your friends be? Noah absorbed this, reassessing the sheriff. Not corrupt, then just cautious. Perhaps even an ally if approached correctly. What kind of proof would you need? He asked finally. Cooper reached into his desk drawer, withdrawing a folded newspaper. 3 years ago, a fire destroyed a meeting hall near Bitterroot Valley. 8 people died. The official report called it an accident, lanterns knocked over during a prayer meeting. Noah's heart quickened. What about it? One of the victims was identified as Samuel Hayes. Cooper's eyes met Noah's steadily. Any relation? The moment stretched between them, fraught with unspoken questions. Noah had never discussed his brother with anyone in town, had guarded that pain jealously. My brother, he acknowledged finally. He got involved with Miller's group after the war, became obsessed with their teachings. And you think Miller had something to do with that fire, with your brother's death? Noah's hand moved unconsciously to the key around his neck. Samuel was gathering evidence against Miller financial records accounts of abuse testimonies from former followers. The night before he planned to take it to federal authorities in Helena, the meeting hall burned. Cooper nodded slowly as if confirming a suspicion. My daughter Margaret disappeared 6 months ago, he said, his voice carefully controlled. 20 years old, engaged to be married. One day she went to visit a friend outside town and never returned. Understanding dawned on Noah. You think Miller's group took her? I think she started attending their prayer meetings in secret. Her fiancé mentioned she'd been talking about visions about purification. Cooper's jaw tightened. 2 weeks after she vanished, I received a letter in her handwriting saying she'd found her true purpose and not to look for her. The pieces clicked into place. Cooper's interest in Miller wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. That's why you're being cautious, Noah realized. You're conducting your own investigation. Miller doesn't know I suspect him, Cooper confirmed. Thinks I'm just another small-town sheriff he can manipulate or intimidate. I've been gathering information slowly, carefully. But I need more. I may have what you need, Noah said, lowering his voice despite the empty office. Samuel left documentation, financial records, testimonies, his own journal detailing Miller's activities. It's in a safety deposit box in Helena. Hope flickered across Cooper's weathered face. That could be enough to bring in federal marshals, especially if we can connect it to more recent activities. We need time, Noah pressed. Sarah's still recovering from her injuries. Emma's traumatized. They can't travel yet, and I can't leave them unprotected. Cooper considered this, clearly weighing his duty against his personal vendetta. I can give you 3 days, he said finally. I'll tell Miller I'm organizing a search of outlying areas, that I need time to gather men. But Hayes, he leaned forward. If he discovers I'm stalling, or if he decides to take matters into his own hands, I understand. Noah stood sensing the meeting had reached its conclusion. Thank you, Sheriff. As he turned to leave, Cooper called after him. Hayes, be careful. Miller's not alone. He's got at least 6 men with him, armed and devoted to his cause. Noah nodded grimly. Neither am I. Outside, the morning had advanced the streets of Pinewood Creek, now bustling with activity. Noah moved cautiously, keeping to the boardwalk, alert for any sign of Isaiah or his followers. He needed supplies before returning to the farm: ammunition, medical materials, food that would keep if they needed to flee. The general store was crowded when he entered, locals gathering to gossip and shop. Conversations hushed briefly at his appearance. Noah was enough of a recluse that his presence in town was noteworthy, then resumed with heightened interest. He felt their stares as he collected what he needed, placing items in a canvas bag with methodical precision. At the counter, Harold Jenkins, Martha's husband and the store's proprietor, greeted him with uncharacteristic reserve. Dr. Hayes, he nodded. Quite a supply run. Winter's coming. Noah replied neutrally, counting out money for his purchases. Harold leaned closer, voice dropping. Those folks staying with you, they in some kind of trouble? Noah stiffened. I don't know what you're talking about. Martha told me, Harold admitted. She's worried. Says the woman's been beaten, that the child doesn't speak. And now these religious people are in town offering rewards for information about a woman and child matching their description. Your wife has an active imagination. Noah deflected, though. Internally, he cursed Martha's loose tongue. Harold wasn't deterred. The silver-haired preacher was in here yesterday showing a photograph. Said it was his daughter-in-law and granddaughter that they were missing, possibly in danger from the woman's delusions. He hesitated. It looked a lot like the woman Martha described. Noah finished gathering his purchases, weighing his response carefully. Harold was well respected in town, his opinion influential. An enemy or ally depending on how this conversation went. What did you tell him? Noah asked finally. Nothing, Harold said firmly. Martha and I don't much care for men who leave bruises on women, whatever story they spin. But others might not be so discerning, especially with the reward he's offering. Relief mingled with gratitude in Noah's chest. Thank you. Harold nodded, then glanced toward the door, before adding quietly, There's a man watching your horse from across the street. Been there since you came in. One of the preacher's followers by the look of him. Noah didn't turn to look, maintaining his casual posture. Dark coat, tall, thin build. That's him. Got 2 others with him now, by the livery. They were watching him then, possibly planning to follow him back to the farm to Sarah and Emma. Noah's mind raced through options, none of them good. Is there a back way out? He asked Harold. The storekeeper nodded slightly. Through the storeroom, leads to the alley behind the buildings. So my boy can take your horse around to meet you there. I'd appreciate that. Harold called to his teenage son, giving instructions in a low voice while Noah finished gathering his supplies. Minutes later, the boy slipped out the front door on an apparent errand, and Harold gestured Noah toward the back of the store. Be careful, Dr. Hayes, Harold just said as Noah reached the storeroom door. These aren't ordinary religious folks. There's something wrong in their eyes, something hungry. Noah nodded grimly. Keep your family close, Harold, and thank Martha for her concern. The alley behind the store was narrow and shadowed, running the length of the main street. Noah moved quickly, keeping close to the buildings, his purchases secured in saddlebags slung over his shoulder. At the end of the alley, Harold's son waited with Noah's horse, looking nervous but determined. Pa said to tell you they're still watching the front of the store, the boy whispered. But there's more of them now. 6, maybe 7. Noah thanked him, pressing a coin into his hand before mounting. Instead of taking the main road out of town, he cut behind the buildings, following a less-used trail that would loop around to approach his farm from the east, rather than the more direct northern route. The detour would add hours to his journey, but if Isaiah's men were planning to follow him, they'd be watching the wrong road. It was a temporary advantage at best. They'd realize their error eventually, but it might buy enough time to prepare. As he rode, Noah's mind turned to what awaited him at the farm. Sarah and Emma vulnerable, despite his precautions. Sophia in the hidden cabin, her fractured memories potentially vital to understanding the danger they faced. And the abandoned church on the ridge where Emma's drawing suggested a confrontation would eventually occur. The brass key around his neck seemed to grow heavier with each mile, a physical reminder of evidence that might save them if he could reach Helena to retrieve it, if it was still where Samuel had left it, if it contained what Noah hoped it did. Too many ifs, too many unknowns. By the time he crested the final hill overlooking his property, the afternoon was waning, shadows lengthening across the valley. Everything appeared peaceful, smoke rising from the chimney, no sign of disturbance or unwelcome visitors. Noah approached cautiously, nonetheless alert for any movement among the trees surrounding his farm. The front door opened as he dismounted, Sarah appearing with rifle in hand, Emma a shadow behind her. "You're late," Sarah said, relief evident beneath her accusation. "We were worried. Had to take a roundabout way," Noah explained, leading his horse toward the barn. "Isaiah's men were watching in town. I didn't want them following me back." Sarah's expression tightened. "Did you see him, Isaiah?" "No, just his followers. But he's been to the sheriff's office claiming legal guardianship of Emma. He's got papers from a judge in Helena." Fear flashed across Sarah's face. She pulled Emma closer to her side, a protective gesture that spoke volumes. "What does that mean? Can he take her legally?" "Not if we can prove it. He's dangerous, that he was responsible for Daniel's death and other crimes." Noah began unsaddling his horse, his movements efficient despite his exhaustion. "Sheriff Cooper is giving us 3 days before he has to act on the guardianship claim." "Can we trust him?" Sarah asked, following Noah into the barn. Emma, a silent shadow beside her. "Oh, I think so. His daughter disappeared 6 months ago. He believes the path took her." Noah hung the saddle over its rack, turning to face Sarah. "Cooper's conducting his own investigation into Miller. He's willing to help if we can provide evidence." Hope flickered in Sarah's eyes, quickly tempered by caution. "What kind of evidence?" "The documents Samuel gathered before the fire. Financial records, testimonies from former followers, evidence of abuse and possibly murder." Noah's hand moved to the key around his neck. "They're in a safety deposit box in Helena." "So we need to go to Helena," Sarah concluded, her voice steadying with purpose. "When do we leave?" Noah hesitated. The logical plan was for him to ride to Helena alone. He could travel faster without Sarah, and Emma be there and back within 2 days if he pushed hard. But leaving them at the farm, even with precautions in place, felt like an unacceptable risk, given what he'd observed in town. "We all go," he decided. "First light tomorrow. Pack only what's essential." Sarah nodded, already mentally cataloging what they would need. "What about the sheriff? Will he help protect us until then?" "He can't officially, not without risking his position. But he'll delay any official action on Isaiah's guardianship claim, give us time to retrieve the evidence." They moved from the barn toward the house, the evening air carrying the first bite of approaching winter. Emma walked between them, her small hand in her mother's, her solemn eyes scanning the trees surrounding the property, as if expecting danger to materialize at any moment. Inside the warmth of the stove enveloped them a simple stew, simmering on its surface, filling the kitchen with savory aromas. Noah realized he hadn't eaten since dawn, hunger suddenly asserting itself now that the immediate tension of the town visit had passed. As Sarah moved to prepare bowls for their meal, Noah crouched to Emma's level, meeting those unnervingly adult eyes directly. "Emma," he said gently, "I need to ask you something important. Your drawings of the church on the ridge, the man with the key, what else can you tell me about them?" The child regarded him steadily, her small face serious. "The sad man is waiting there," she said finally. "He says the truth is hidden in the walls." "The sad man, does he have a name?" Emma nodded. "Samuel. He says he's your brother." Noah's breath caught. There was no way Emma could know this, no way she could have heard the name from anyone but him or Sarah, and he was certain neither had mentioned Samuel to her. "Emma," Sarah intervened, concern sharp in her voice. "How do you know that name?" "He tells me in my dreams," Emma explained with a child's matter-of-fact acceptance of the inexplicable. "He shows me things: the church, the fire, the hidden place where the bad men take the women who try to leave." Noah and Sarah exchanged troubled glances over the child's head. Either Emma had an extraordinarily vivid imagination influenced by her traumatic experiences, or she was indeed experiencing something beyond normal perception. "What hidden place, Emma?" Sarah asked, kneeling beside her daughter. "Under the ground, where it's dark and cold." Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "Where they keep the ones who still have use." A chill ran down Noah's spine. The description matched rumors he'd heard years ago when he was searching for Samuel after the fire whispers of an underground compound, where Isaiah kept his most devoted followers, or perhaps his most troublesome ones. "Do you know where this place is?" he presses gently. Emma shook her head. "Samuel doesn't know either. He's still looking." The implication was clear and disturbing in Emma's dreams or visions. Samuel was not only alive, but actively searching for something connected to Isaiah's cult. Whether this represented the child's subconscious processing of trauma or something more supernatural, Noah couldn't say. Emma, Sarah said carefully, these dreams about Samuel, are they frightening? No, the child replied. He's kind, sad but kind. He wants to help the trapped ladies. She looked directly at Noah. He says you have to go to the church tonight, before the bad men come. Tonight, Noah repeated, alarm sharpening his tone. Why tonight specifically? Emma's expression grew distant, as if listening to a voice only she could hear. Because they're already on their way. Before Noah could question her further, a sound from outside froze them all. The distant but unmistakable baying of hounds carried on the evening breeze. Sarah's face drained of color. Tracking dogs, she whispered. They use them to find people who try to leave the path. Noah was already moving, checking the windows, the rifle he kept loaded by the door. How many do you think? 4, maybe 5 from the sound. Sarah replied, years of living with the path, having taught her to recognize such details. They'll have handlers with them, armed men. How far? Miles still but closing. Dogs can track over long distances, especially if they have something with our scent. Noah made a quick calculation. We need to leave, now, before they have us surrounded. The horses won't outrun tracking dogs, Sarah objected. Not with Emma. We're not taking the horses, Noah decided. There's another way underground. Sarah's eyes widened with understanding. The tunnel you mentioned, from the barn to the creek. It's our best chance. Dogs will lose the scent in water. Noah moved to the cupboard, grabbing a bag and filling it with essential supplies, food, ammunition, matches, a medical kit. Sarah, get warm clothes for you and Emma. Only what you can carry easily. As they prepared with urgent efficiency, Noah's mind raced ahead to their next steps. The tunnel would lead them to the creek, and from there, they could follow it upstream, toward the ridge, toward the abandoned church, where Emma's drawing suggested answers waited. It went against every tactical instinct to move toward the very place featured so prominently in the child's disturbing artwork. Yet Noah found himself believing her warning, believing that whatever awaited them at the church was preferable to being trapped in the farmhouse by Isaiah's men and their tracking dogs. What about your friend? Sarah asked as she helped Emma into a warm coat. The one in the hidden cabin. Noah hesitated. In the tension of the day, he had almost forgotten about Sophia. I'll check on her, tell her to stay hidden. Isaiah's men are looking for a woman and child, not a solitary woman. Will she be safe? Safer than with us for now. Noah handed Sarah the loaded revolver from his belt. Take this, head for the barn and wait for me there. If anyone approaches before I return, use the tunnel and don't wait. Sarah accepted the weapon with grim determination. Be careful. Noah slipped out the back door, moving through the gathering dusk toward the tree line where Sophia's cabin lay hidden. The baying of the hounds seemed closer now, though still distant enough that they had time, not much, but enough if they moved quickly. The cabin was a simple one-room structure built decades ago as a trapper's shelter and maintained by Noah after he purchased the property. From the outside, it appeared abandoned, its windows shuttered, vegetation allowed to grow up around its walls. Noah knocked softly before entering, finding Sophia seated by the small stove, a blanket around her shoulders despite the warmth of the room. She looked up at his entrance, her pale face showing recognition but confusion. Dr. Hayes, she said, her voice slightly slurred. Is it time for my medicine? The head injury had left her with periods of disorientation, her lucidity coming and going unpredictably. Right now, she seemed to have forgotten their conversation in the barn, returned to the passive patient role she'd occupied for months. No, Sophia, Noah said gently, crouching beside her chair. I've come to warn you, there are men coming, dangerous men. You need to stay in by, keep the shutters closed, the door locked. Don't make a sound or show a light no matter what you hear outside. Confusion clouded her features. Are they looking for me? No, Noah assured her, though he wasn't entirely certain. If Sophia had indeed escaped from the path, as her fragmented memories suggested, Isaiah might well be searching for her too. They're looking for others, but they're dangerous to anyone they find. Sophia nodded slowly, the instruction penetrating her confusion. I'll stay hidden, she promised. I know how to hide from them. The statement sent a chill down Noah's spine, further confirmation of her connection to Isaiah's cult. But there was no time to question her further. The hound's baying was growing closer. "There's food and water," Noah told her, moving toward the door. "Enough for several days. I'll return when I can." As he turned to leave, Sophia caught his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Her eyes had cleared, sudden lucidity replacing confusion. "The church," she said urgently. "Be careful at the church. That's where they perform the rituals, where they took the others before they disappeared." The echo of her earlier warning unsettled Noah. "How do you know about the church, Sophia?" "I was there," she whispered, her eyes wide with the remembered fear. "The night of the fire. I saw. She broke off, pressing her hands to her temples in pain. "What did you see?" Noah pressed, even as he knew he should be returning to Sarah and Emma. "Samuel," Sophia breathed. "I saw Samuel escape the flames, but he wasn't alone." Before Noah could question her further, the baying of the hounds changed pitch, the sound dogs make when they've picked up a fresh scent. They were close now, perhaps at the edge of his property. "I have to go," he told Sophia, gently disengaging her grip. "Stay hidden. Stay safe." He slipped out of the cabin, moving swiftly through the trees, back toward the farm. The darkness had deepened, but Noah knew these woods intimately, navigating by feel and memory, more than sight. The barn was a looming shadow against the night sky, the house beyond it showing no lights. Sarah had followed his instructions, dousing all flames before leaving. Noah approached cautiously, alert for any sign that Isaiah's men had already reached the farm. Inside the barn, Sarah waited with Emma, both dressed warmly, small packs on their backs. Relief washed over Sarah's face as Noah entered. "The dogs," she whispered, "getting closer. We need to move now." Noah led them to the back of the barn, where a trapdoor lay hidden beneath straw and old sacking. He lifted it to reveal stone steps descending into darkness. "I'll go first. Sarah, you follow with Emma. Stay close." The tunnel was cool and damp, the air heavy with the scent of earth and stone. Noah lit a small lantern, its glow revealing a passage tall enough to stand in, shored up, with timber supports, not a natural formation, but a deliberately constructed escape route, perhaps dating back to the early settlement days, when conflicts with native tribes were common. They moved in silence, the only sounds their footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. Behind them, muffled by earth and distance, the baying of the hounds continued, now joined by men's voices, Isaiah's followers reaching the farm, finding it empty. After what seemed an eternity of hunched movement through the confining space, they reached the tunnel's end, a vertical shaft with crude handholds carved into the wall leading up to a trapdoor, concealed beneath a fallen log near the creek bed. "Wait here," Noah whispered, handing the lantern to Sarah. "Let me check if it's clear." He climbed the handholds, silently pushing gently against the trapdoor. It resisted briefly, then lifted, allowing him to peer cautiously into the night. The creek lay before him, a silver ribbon in the faint moonlight. Beyond it, the ridge rose toward the abandoned church, now illuminated by multiple points of light, lanterns or candles visible through its broken windows. Noah's blood ran cold. Emma's warning echoed in his mind. "He says you have to go to the church tonight, before the bad men come." But the church was already occupied by whom? Isaiah's followers, or someone else. The creek whispered its secrets as they crossed icy water, numbing their feet despite sturdy boots. Noah led the way, carrying Emma on his back, the child's arms wrapped trustingly around his neck. Sarah followed, clutching the revolver, her eyes constantly scanning the darkness for threats. Behind them, voices in the baying of hounds grew more distant, the water obscuring their scent, buying precious time. Before them loomed the ridge, dark and forbidding, the church at its crest, now visible only by the faint glow of light from its windows. "Who's up there?" Sarah whispered, as they reached the far bank, the church still a good half-mile climb away. "I don't know," Noah admitted, setting Emma gently on her feet. "Could be Isaiah's men, could be." He hesitated, unwilling to voice the impossible hope that had taken root since Emma's revelation. "Could be someone else." "Samuel," Emma said with certainty, her small voice startling in the darkness. "He's waiting for us." Sarah and Noah exchanged glances over the child's head. Neither spoke the obvious question. How could Samuel possibly be alive after the fire that had claimed 8 lives? "We'll approach carefully," Noah decided, adjusting the rifle slung across his back. "There's a deer trail that winds up the east side of the ridge, less visible than the main path." They began the ascent, the terrain growing steeper and rockier. Emma moved with surprising agility for a child her age, following Noah's guidance on where to place her feet, which handholds were secure. Sarah kept pace behind them, her breathing controlled despite her still healing injuries. As they climbed higher, the church's illuminated windows became clearer, not the chaotic flicker of multiple lanterns that would suggest a group, but a steady, concentrated light source. One person, perhaps two. Noah signaled for them to stop when they reached a rocky outcropping about 100 yards from the church. "Wait here," he whispered. "I'll scout ahead." "No," Sarah objected, grabbing his arm. "We stay together." "It's too risky," Noah argued. "If it's a trap." "And if it isn't," Sarah countered, "if it's really Samuel, we're wasting time." Her eyes held as resolute despite her fear. "Emma's visions have led us this far. I trust them." Noah looked at the child, who returned his gaze with that same unnerving certainty she'd shown since arriving at his farm. "The sad man is waiting," she repeated. "He says it's time." Against his better judgment, against years of military training that screamed at him to reconnoiter alone, Noah found himself nodding. "Stay close. At the first sign of trouble, we retreat." They approached the church together, moving from shadow to shadow. Up close, the building was even more dilapidated than it appeared from a distance. Weathered boards, silvered by years of Montana winters, broken windows like empty eye sockets, the steeple listing dangerously to one side. A side door, half hidden by overgrown bushes, offered their best chance of unobserved entry. Noah tested it carefully, finding it unlocked, hinges protesting softly as he eased it open. They slipped inside one by one, finding themselves in a small antechamber, perhaps once a vestry, where the preacher had prepared for services. Light filtered beneath the inner door leading to the main sanctuary, a warm golden glow that spoke of candles rather than lanterns. And voices, or rather a single voice, too low to make out words, but unmistakably human. Noah drew his revolver, gesturing for Sarah and Emma to stay behind him as he approached the inner door. It had a small, diamond-shaped window, set at eye level, clouded with age but still transparent enough to offer a view of the sanctuary beyond. The church's interior was illuminated by dozens of candles, their flames casting dancing shadows across weathered pews and the simple altar at the front. Before that altar stood a man, his back to Noah's position, head bowed as if in prayer or contemplation. He was slender, fair-haired, despite the years that had passed. Even from behind, even after 5 years believed dead, there was no mistaking him. Samuel. Noah's vision blurred, emotion overwhelming him in a wave. His brother lived. The knowledge rearranged the world, shifted everything Noah had believed about the past 5 years, about his own guilt and failure. "It's him," he whispered, his voice thick. "It's Samuel." Before Sarah could respond, Emma stepped forward, her small hand reaching for the door latch. "We need to go in now," she said with that uncanny certainty. "Before the others come." Noah wanted to stop her, to assess the situation further, to ensure this wasn't some elaborate trap, but the door was already swinging open. Emma stepping through with the confidence of someone entering a familiar room. Samuel turned at the sound, his face momentarily frozen in shock. He was thinner than Noah remembered, his once boyish features hardened by years, and experienced a scar running along his jawline that hadn't been there before. But his eyes, those were unchanged, the same clear blue that had always seemed to see beyond surfaces to the truth beneath. "Noah," he breathed, disbelief warring with joy on his face. "You came." For a moment, neither man moved, separated by 5 years of grief and guilt and unanswered questions. Then Emma stepped forward, placing herself between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. "I told him you were waiting," she said to Samuel, as casual as if they were old friends. "I told him about the key." Samuel's gaze dropped to the child wonder, replacing shock. "You did well, little one," he said softly, then looked back at Noah. "You brought them, just as I hoped you would." The spell broke. Noah crossed the space between them in 3 long strides, pulling his brother into a fierce embrace. Samuel returned it with equal intensity, both men clinging to each other as if afraid the other might disappear if they let go. "How?" Noah managed, finally drawing back to study his brother's face. "The fire they identified your body." "Not mine," Samuel replied grimly. "Another man's similar bill, wearing my clothes. I switched them after—" He broke off, glancing at Emma. "After I realized what Isaiah truly was, what he was planning." Sarah had remained by the door, watching the reunion with wary hope. Now she stepped forward, her hand on Emma's shoulder, protective, despite the child's apparent comfort with Samuel. "You know who we are," she said, not a question, but a statement. Samuel nodded. "Sarah Miller, and Emma the seventh vessel according to Isaiah's prophecies." His expression softened, though I suspect she's something both more ordinary and more extraordinary than that. "You've been watching us," Sarah continued, piecing together the puzzle, "guiding us through Emma's visions." "Not exactly guiding," Samuel corrected, "more like suggesting possibilities. Emma's gift made her receptive to certain impressions, certain images I wanted her to see." He looked at the child with something like awe. "I never expected her to receive them so clearly or to remember my name." "Why the secrecy?" Noah demanded, the initial joy of reunion giving way to confusion and a hint of anger. "Why let me believe you were dead for 5 years? Why not come to me directly?" Samuel's expression darkened. "Because Isaiah Miller is not just a religious zealot. Noah, he's something far worse and far more dangerous." "What do you mean?" "I mean, he's the reason half your medical unit died at Antietam," Samuel said bluntly. "Captain Isaiah Miller, 17th Virginia Infantry, a deserter who left his men to die, who reinvented himself as a preacher after the war using religion to build a power base." Noah staggered back as if physically struck. "What? That's why I couldn't come to you directly," Samuel continued. "Isaiah has spies everywhere in towns throughout the territory, in government offices, even in law enforcement. If he'd known I survived the fire, that I was gathering evidence against him, he would have sent men to kill us both." "But the evidence," Noah said, hand moving to the key around his neck. "The safety deposit box in Helena." "A decoy," Samuel admitted. "Insurance in case something happened to me before I could complete my work. It contains enough to raise questions about Isaiah, but not enough to destroy him completely." He moved to the altar where what appeared to be a leather-bound journal lay open. "The real evidence is here and in other places only I know about." Sarah stepped closer, studying Samuel with new intensity. "How long have you been watching us? How did you know where we'd go when we escaped?" "I've been infiltrating the path for years," Samuel explained. "After the fire, I took on a new identity, Gabriel, a convert from another religious community. Worked my way into Isaiah's inner circle, became his right hand." Self-loathing flashed across his features. "Had to participate in things He shook his head, but it was the only way to gather evidence to understand the full scope of his operation." "You knew Daniel," Sarah realized. "My husband." Samuel's expression softened with genuine regret. "I did. He was a good man, too good for the path. When he started questioning his father's teachings, trying to protect Emma, I tried to help him escape with you both." Pain filled his eyes. "I failed. By the time I learned of the purification ritual, it was too late." "But you helped us," Sarah said, understanding dawning. "The maps I found in Daniel's things, the route marked through the forest, that was your work." "It was all I could do," Samuel confirmed. "Direct intervention would have exposed me, destroyed years of work. But I could leave breadcrumbs, hope you'd find them." "And you've been watching my farm," Noah added, pieces falling into place. "You knew Sarah and Emma would come there." "I hoped they would," Samuel corrected. "The path has eyes everywhere, but your isolation made your farm one of the few safe harbors in the territory. When Emma's visions began showing her a man with a key, your key, I knew it was time to bring everything together." "Why now?" Noah asked. "Why not approach me earlier? Tell me the truth." "Because Isaiah's endgame is approaching," Samuel said grimly. "The purification of the seventh vessel, a ritual he believes will cement his power, prove his divine authority to his followers." He looked at Emma, genuine concern in his eyes. "He's been preparing for it for years, gathering resources, placing followers in positions of influence throughout the territory." "What exactly is this ritual?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with fear for her daughter. Samuel hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal in Emma's presence. "It involves fire," he said finally. "Not metaphorical, but actual flames. Isaiah believes true purification requires passing through fire, that the chosen vessel's spirit must be freed from earthly constraints to channel divine revelation." The horrific implication hung in the air. Sarah pulled Emma closer, as if her embrace could shield the child from such monstrous beliefs. When Noah demanded, "How long do we have?" 3 days, Samuel replied. "The full moon." "Isaiah's been making preparations at the compound for weeks, constructing a special altar, gathering the witnesses who will participate." His jaw tightened. "That's why I had to risk contacting Emma through her visions, risk bringing you here tonight. We're running out of time. We need to get Emma away, Sarah insisted. Far from here somewhere. Isaiah can't find us. It won't work, Samuel said gently. He'd hunt you to the ends of the earth. The only way to truly protect Emma is to destroy Isaiah's power, completely expose his crimes, his true identity, break his hold over his followers. With your evidence, Noah concluded, nodding toward the journal on the altar. This and more, Samuel confirmed. Financial records showing how he's enriched himself through his followers' donations. Testimonies from former members who were abused, manipulated. Evidence linking him to at least 7 deaths, including Daniel's, all disguised as accidents or religious rituals gone wrong. In his war crimes, Noah added the pieces connecting in his mind. His desertion, the men who died because of it. Samuel nodded grimly. That too. Though proving events from 10 years ago is challenging, especially with records destroyed during the war. How do we use this evidence? Sarah asked the practical question, cutting through the brothers' reunion. The local sheriff is sympathetic, but cautious. Federal authorities would take too long to respond. There's another option, Samuel said, a strange light entering his eyes. Isaiah's power comes from his followers' belief in his divine authority. Shatter that belief, and his empire crumbles. You want to confront him publicly? Noah realized. Force him to face the evidence in front of his own people. Exactly. In 3 days, he's planning to bring his entire congregation to the compound for Emma's purification. Over 100 people, devoted followers. Yes, but also ordinary men and women who've been deceived, who might turn against him if they knew the truth. It's too dangerous, Sarah objected. We can't risk Emma. I've seen it. Emma interrupted, her small voice startling the adults. In my drawings, the fire in the church, the people watching. But it's not me in the flames, she looked up at Samuel. It's the bad man. The truth burns him. An uneasy silence followed the child's pronouncement. Noah studied his brother, seeing both the familiar idealism that had always characterized Samuel and something harder beneath it, a determination forged through years of pretending to serve a man he despised. There's something you're not telling us, Noah said finally. Samuel sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made Noah's chest ache. There are others, he admitted. Women who tried to leave the path, who were caught. Isaiah keeps them as the compound in underground cells. They're alive, but... He shook his head. They won't be for long if Isaiah's ritual succeeds. He'll have no further use for them. How many? Sarah demanded, horror and recognition mingling in her expression. 8 that I know of, possibly more. Margaret Cooper, Noah said, remembering the sheriff's missing daughter. Is she one of them? Samuel nodded grimly. She is, along with Julia Walsh, Rebecca Gardner, and others whose disappearances were explained away as elopements or accidents. He hesitated. There's another woman who escaped about 6 months ago. I helped her get away during the confusion of a prayer meeting, but she was injured in the process. I never learned what happened to her. Noah's blood ran cold. Sophia, he whispered. You know her, Samuel asked sharply. I found her wandering in the forest near my property, injured and disoriented. She's been staying in the cabin behind my farm, recovering. Noah shook his head, pieces falling into place. She has memory lapses from the head injury, but sometimes she remembers fragments, prayers, rituals, a man with silver hair. She survived. Samuel breathed genuine relief in his voice. I thought she might have died from her injuries. She was bleeding badly when I last saw her. She mentioned you, Noah recalled. Said Samuel had helped her escape, that he promised to find her when it was safe. He met his brother's gaze. She saw you the night of the fire, said you weren't alone when you escaped. A shadow crossed Samuel's face. No, I wasn't. There was another woman with me, Catherine. She didn't survive the journey. Pain tightened his features. Isaiah's men caught up with us 3 days after the fire. I got away. She didn't. The revelation hung heavy in the air, evidence of the personal cost Samuel had paid in his years-long crusade against Isaiah Miller. Noah saw his brother anew, not just the idealistic younger sibling he remembered, but a man hardened by loss and grim purpose. So what's your plan? Noah asked finally. How do we expose Isaiah without endangering Emma or the women he's holding captive? Before Samuel could answer, Emma stiffened her head, turning toward the door they'd entered through. They're coming, she whispered, fear sharpening her voice. The bad men with logs. Noah moved instantly to the window, peering out into the darkness. In the distance, pinpricks of light moved through the trees at the base of the ridge lanterns, carried by Isaiah's searchers, the faint baying of hounds carried on the night breeze. How many? Samuel asked, joining him at the window. At least 6, maybe more, Noah assessed. They must have found the tunnel exit, picked up our trail. We need to move, Samuel decided. There's another way out through the cemetery behind the church. A path leads down to a cave system the path doesn't know about. The caves Emma drew, Sarah realized, already gathering their meager belongings. With the waterfall, Samuel looked at the child with renewed wonder. Yes, they connect to an underground river that emerges about 3 miles from here. We can follow it to a safe house I've established. They moved quickly, Samuel gathering his journals and maps while Noah checked his weapons. Emma stood near the altar, her small face solemn as she studied the candle flames. Emma, Sarah called, concern sharpening her voice. Come, sweetheart. We need to go. The child didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames as if reading messages in their movement. When she finally spoke, her voice had taken on that distant quality that signaled one of her visions. He's with them, she said softly. The silver man. He knows we're here. Samuel and Noah exchanged alarmed glances. Isaiah came himself, Samuel asked, genuine surprise in his voice. He never leads the search parties. He does for the 7th vessel, Noah said grimly, understanding the significance. For Emma, he'd break his own rules. This changes things, Samuel muttered, rapidly adjusting plans. If Isaiah is captured or killed before we can expose him publicly, his followers might view him as a martyr. His influence would continue even after his death. So what do we do? Sarah demanded, already pulling Emma toward the back door. We split up, Samuel decided. Noah and I will delay them here, create a diversion. You and Emma follow the path through the cemetery to the caves. We'll meet you there. No, Sarah objected immediately. We stay together. There's no time to argue, Samuel insisted. If they catch us all together, everything is lost. This way we have a chance. Noah could see the tactical sense in Samuel's plan, even as part of him rebelled against separating. He's right, Sarah, he said reluctantly. Emma's safety has to be the priority. If you reach the caves, you'll be beyond Isaiah's reach at least temporarily. Sarah looked between the brothers, clearly torn. Then Emma spoke, her voice clear and certain once more. We have to go with the sad man's plan, she said, using her personal name for Samuel. The silver man wants to catch us all together. We can't let him. That settled it. Sarah nodded, her expression resolute despite her fear. What's the path? How will we find the cave entrance? Samuel quickly described the route through the small cemetery behind the church, down a narrow trail that wound along the eastern slope of the ridge to a waterfall that concealed the cave entrance. Stay in the cave until we come for you, he instructed. If we haven't arrived by dawn, there's an emergency pack hidden in a crevice to the left of the entrance. Enough supplies to reach Helena if necessary. Noah pulled Sarah aside as Samuel made final preparations, blocking the front entrance with pews to slow Isaiah's men when they arrived. If we don't make it, he began, but Sarah cut him off. You will, she said fiercely. You have to. Her eyes held his, conveying everything words couldn't in that moment. Gratitude, fear, and something deeper that had grown between them in their short time together. Noah's hand moved to the key around his neck, removing the leather cord that had held it for 5 years. Take this, he said, placing it in her palm. If something happens, the safety deposit box in Helena, it might not have everything Samuel's gathered, but it's enough to start an investigation. Sarah's fingers closed around the key, her eyes never leaving his. Come back to us, she whispered, both of you. Then she was gone, leading Emma through the small door behind the altar into the cemetery beyond. Noah watching them disappear into the darkness, a prayer he didn't believe in rising unbidden in his mind. Keep them safe. They'll be all right, Samuel said, coming to stand beside him. Sarah's stronger than she looks, and Emma. He shook his head in wonder. That child sees more than any of us. How do you explain it? Noah asked, turning to face his brother. Her visions, the drawings, knowing your name without being told. Samuel considered this, his expression thoughtful. I've seen many things in the past 5 years that challenge rational explanation, he said finally. Emma's gift may be unusual, but it's not unique. Some minds are more permeable than others, more receptive to impressions most people filter out. He smiled slightly. Or perhaps there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, brother. The Shakespeare quote, a favorite of their fathers, brought a reluctant smile to Noah's lips. For a moment, the years of separation fell away, and they were simply brothers, again united in purpose, if not in belief. The moment was broken by the sound of voices approaching the church, men calling to each other as they ascended the ridge, the excited baying of hounds drawing nearer. "They're close," Noah observed, moving to a window to assess their position. "At least 8 men plus Isaiah. We need to buy Sarah and Emma as much time as possible," Samuel said, checking the revolver he carried. "Draw their attention completely, make them forget there might be others." "How?" Samuel's smile was grim. "By giving Isaiah exactly what he's wanted for 5 years, me." Before Noah could object, Samuel had moved to the front door, sliding aside the makeshift barricade he'd created. He stepped onto the porch into full view of the approaching searchers, hands raised above his head. "Isaiah Miller," he called, his voice carrying in the night air. "I believe you've been looking for me." The searchers froze, lanterns illuminating their shocked faces. At their center stood a tall figure in a long coat despite the autumn chill. Silver-haired, austere, his bearing that of a man accustomed to authority and obedience. Isaiah Miller, leader of the divine path, self-proclaimed prophet, and if Samuel was to be believed, a war criminal whose desertion had cost the lives of dozens. "Gabriel," Isaiah's voice carried clearly, disbelief evident even at a distance. "Is that you?" "Well, not Gabriel," Samuel replied, lowering his hand slowly. "Samuel Hayes. Back from the dead, you might say." A murmur ran through the gathered men, recognition shock, perhaps even fear. Isaiah's face, visible now as he stepped forward into the light spilling from the church, showed a complex mixture of emotions, surprise giving way to calculation, then to something like triumph. "My son," he called, his voice taking on the resonant quality of a practiced orator. "You've returned to us at last, just as the prophecy foretold." Samuel's laugh held no humor. "Still spinning lies, Isaiah. Still twisting scripture to serve your ambitions." He gestured toward the church behind him. "I've been gathering evidence for 5 years, financial records, testimonies from those you've abused, proof of your true identity. Captain Isaiah Miller, deserter, murderer, false prophet." Isaiah's expression hardened, the benevolent mask slipping to reveal the cold calculation beneath. "Restrain him," he ordered his men. "He's clearly unwell. Dangerous." The men hesitated, glancing between their leader and the figure on the church steps. Samuel had been Isaiah's right hand for years before his supposed death, respected, even feared. His accusations created doubt where absolute faith had been. "You men know me," Samuel addressed them directly. "You've followed my orders, trusted my judgment as Gabriel. Ask yourselves why I would abandon that position of authority, why I would risk everything to stand here now and call Isaiah Miller a fraud." Noah watched from the shadows inside the church, rifle ready but held in reserve. Samuel's strategy was clear now. Create confusion, division among Isaiah's followers. Buy time for Sarah and Emma to reach safety. "Enough," Isaiah's voice cracked like a whip. "This is not Gabriel, but an impostor sent to test your faith. The real Gabriel perished in the cleansing fire 5 years ago, a willing sacrifice to purify our path." "A convenient story," Samuel countered, "but false like everything else you've built your power on. Tell them, Isaiah. Tell them about Antietam, about the men who died because their captain abandoned his post. Tell them about the money you've siphoned from their tithes, the women you've imprisoned beneath the compound." Isaiah's facade cracked, further rage bleeding through the prophet's mask. "Take him," he snarled to his followers. Now, 2 men moved forward, then stopped as Noah emerged from the church, rifle raised. "That would be unwise," he said quietly, but with the unmistakable authority of a combat veteran. The standoff stretched, tension crackling in the night air. Isaiah's men outnumbered the Hayes brothers, but doubt had been sown. The absolute certainty that had driven them up the ridge in pursuit of heretics was fracturing in the face of Samuel's accusations and Noah's steady rifle. "Dr. Hayes," Isaiah addressed Noah directly, his voice regaining its smoothness. "I see you've been reunited with your brother, a joyous occasion surely. But I fear Samuel is unwell, his mind poisoned by delusions, by trauma from the fire." "Save your manipulation for your followers, Isaiah," Noah replied coldly. "I know who you are, what you've done. And what exactly do you think you know?" Isaiah challenged, his confidence returning as he assessed the tactical situation. 8 armed men against 2, regardless of temporary confusion. The odds were still in his favor. "I know you're planning to murder a 7-year-old girl in 3 days," Noah said bluntly. "I know you've killed before Daniel Miller, The women who tried to leave your cult, my brother's friend Catherine. Preposterous accusations without evidence. Isaiah dismissed, though his eyes had hardened at the mention of Catherine. Where is Sarah Miller? Where is the child? That's what matters now. Beyond your reach, Samuel answered. Safe from your purification. Isaiah's laugh was cold. No one is beyond my reach, Samuel. You should know that better than most. He gestured to his men. Search the church. Find the woman and child. As several men moved toward the building, a new voice rang out from the darkness beyond the circle of lantern light. That's far enough. Sheriff Cooper stepped into view, a revolver-drawn badge gleaming in the lantern light. Behind him stood at least a dozen men from town, not deputies but ordinary citizens armed with rifles and determined expressions. Sheriff, Isaiah greeted him, surprise quickly masked by his usual confidence. I'm glad you've come. These men are harboring fugitives, my daughter-in-law and granddaughter. The woman is unwell, dangerous to herself and the child. That's not how I understand it, Cooper replied evenly. From what I hear, you're the dangerous one, Miller. Or should I say Captain Miller? Isaiah's expression flickered, the first real uncertainty crossing his features. I don't know what lies these men have told you. Not lies, Cooper interrupted. Evidence. Records from the War Department confirming Captain Isaiah Miller deserted his post at Antietam, resulting in the deaths of 37 men under his command. He stepped closer, his revolver unwavering, including my brother. The revelation hung in the air, shifting the balance of power further. Isaiah's followers exchanged uneasy glances, their certainty crumbling in the face of specific accusations from a respected lawman. And that's not all, Cooper continued. We've found your underground cells, Miller. The women you've imprisoned, including my daughter, Margaret. At this, murmurs of shock ran through Isaiah's men. Even the most devoted followers had limits to what they would accept, what atrocities they would overlook in the name of faith. This is absurd, Isaiah blustered, though sweat now beaded on his forehead despite the cool night air. Sheriff, you've been misled. The U.S. Marshal's office has been notified. Cooper cut him off. They're on their way from Helena with federal warrants. It's over, Miller. For a moment it seemed Isaiah might surrender, his shoulders slumped, his expression defeated. Then, with the desperate speed of a cornered predator, he drew a concealed revolver, aiming not at Cooper or the Hayes brothers, but at one of his own followers. Drop your weapons, he ordered the lawmen and the brothers, or Thomas dies. The young man he'd grabbed, barely more than a boy, his face pale with shock, was one of Isaiah's most devoted disciples. That the prophet would use him as a shield shattered any remaining illusions among the followers. You see his true nature now. Samuel addressed the Path members directly. The man who promised you salvation threatens one of his own. Is this your divine leader, your prophet? The men who had pursued them up the ridge with such certainty now looked lost, their faith visibly crumbling as Isaiah pressed his revolver harder against his hostage's temple. Back away, Isaiah demanded, dragging the young man toward the forest's edge. All of you, no one moved. The tableau held Isaiah and his hostage, the sheriff, and townsmen, the Hayes brothers, on the church steps, and Isaiah's former followers, caught between their disintegrating beliefs and the harsh reality before them. It was Emma who broke the stalemate. She appeared at the edge of the cemetery, having doubled back despite Samuel's instructions. Her small figure, illuminated by the scattered lanterns, seemed to draw all eyes. Let him go, she said, her voice clear and carrying despite its childish pitch. It's me you want, the seventh vessel. Emma, no. Sarah's anguished cry came from somewhere behind her, but the child had already stepped forward, placing herself between the armed groups. Isaiah's eyes widened, a strange light entering them. The child comes willingly, he breathed, his voice taking on the cadence of prophecy. Just as it was foretold. Emma, get back, Noah ordered, terror for the child overriding tactical considerations. But Emma stood her ground, those unnervingly adult eyes fixed on Isaiah. You're afraid, she said simply. You've always been afraid. That's why you hurt people. Why you hide the truth. Isaiah's expression contorted, the prophet's mask slipping entirely to reveal naked rage beneath. Be silent, he snarled. You know nothing. I see you, Emma continued, unperturbed by his anger. I see what you did at the battle, how you ran away, how the men died calling your name. The accusation, delivered in a child's voice but with uncanny precision, struck Isaiah like a physical blow. His grip on the hostage loosened, the young man twisting free, and stumbling toward the safety of the gathered townsmen. "Which?" Isaiah hissed, his revolver now trained on Emma. "Demon child." "No," Emma replied calmly. "Just a girl who sees the truth." She pointed to the church behind them. "The fire is coming, but not for me, for your lies." As if her words had summoned it, a flicker of orange light appeared in one of the church windows, small at first, then growing rapidly. Fire spreading through the dry timber of the abandoned building with supernatural speed. The candles, Samuel realized, pulling Noah back from the steps as flames became visible through the open door. They must have toppled during the confrontation. The blaze grew with unnatural ferocity, as if years of abandonment had left the church thirsting for flame. Within minutes, the entire structure was engulfed, a pillar of fire rising against the night sky, visible for miles, a beacon that would draw every eye in the valley. In the confusion, Isaiah made his move. He lunged toward Emma, revolver raised, face contorted with madness and desperation. "If I can't have the vessel, no one will." 3 shots rang out simultaneously from Noah's rifle, from Samuel's revolver, and from Sheriff Cooper's weapon. Isaiah staggered, weapon falling from lifeless fingers, expression frozen in eternal surprise. He collapsed to the ground before Emma, blood pooling beneath him, soaking into the earth that had supported his false prophecies for so long. The child looked down at the fallen prophet, her face solemn but unsurprised, as if she had known this ending long before it arrived. "The truth burns," she said softly, echoing her earlier drawing. Sarah rushed forward, gathering Emma into her arms, checking frantically for injuries, though the child appeared untouched by the violence that had unfolded around her. The fire continued to consume the church, turning it into a pyre that illuminated the ridge like daylight. Isaiah's followers stood transfixed, watching their spiritual center reduced to ash, their leader lying dead at the feet of the child he had pursued with such obsession. "It's over," Cooper said, holstering his weapon as he approached Noah and Samuel. "The marshals will handle the rest when they arrive, the women in the cells, the financial crimes, all of it." Noah nodded, his attention fixed on Sarah and Emma, now huddled together at a safe distance from the burning church. The terror of the past days of Isaiah's pursuit of the threat to Emma was giving way to something else. Relief, yes, but also a dawning recognition of what might come next. "What will you do now?" he asked his brother quietly. Samuel's gaze was distant, watching the flames consume the last physical symbol of his 5-year deception. "Testify, I suppose. Help the marshals build their case against the Path's remaining leadership." He glanced at Noah. "After that, I don't know. I've been Gabriel for so long, I'm not sure who Samuel Hayes is anymore." "You'll remember," Noah assured him, clasping his shoulder, "with time." As the brothers stood watching the church burn, Sarah approached Emma's hand, held tightly in hers. The 4 of them formed an unlikely circle: a doctor who had lost his faith, a prophet who had found his truth, a mother who had never stopped fighting, and a child who saw what others couldn't. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, the question directed at all of them and none of them. Noah looked at the burning church, at Isaiah's body being covered by Cooper's men, at the dazed followers being led down the ridge toward town. Then he looked at Sarah and Emma, at the possibility they represented. "We heal," he said simply. "All of us." Emma smiled, then a real child's smile, perhaps the first Noah had seen from her. "The sad man isn't sad anymore," she observed, looking at Samuel. Samuel's laugh held surprise and genuine warmth. "No, I suppose I'm not," he agreed, ruffling her hair with tentative affection. As dawn broke over the Montana territory, painting the sky in shades of pearl and gold, the 4 of them descended the ridge together. Behind them, the church continued to burn, consuming the past in cleansing flame. Before them lay Pinewood Creek, and beyond it, Noah's farm, no longer a hermit's retreat, but a place where new beginnings might take root. In the days that followed, federal marshals arrived to take custody of Isaiah's remaining followers, to free the women imprisoned beneath the compound, to collect evidence for prosecutions that would stretch from Montana to Virginia. Cooper was reunited with his daughter Margaret, though both knew recovery from her captivity would be a long, difficult road. Sophia Allen, upon learning of Isaiah's death and Samuel's return, began to recover her memories more rapidly, filling in gaps in the federal case, providing testimony about rituals and abuses the Path had kept hidden. She and Samuel spoke for hours, survivors of the same nightmare, each helping the other process what they had endured. A week after the confrontation at the church, Noah stood on his porch watching Sarah and Emma in the garden. They were planting bulbs for spring, a gesture of faith in a future that had seemed impossible just days before. Emma laughed at something her mother said to sound bright and carefree in the autumn air. "They're staying then?" Samuel asked, joining his brother on the porch. Noah nodded. "For the winter at least. After that." He shrugged, leaving possibilities unspoken. Samuel studied him with knowing eyes. "You care for them, both of them." "I do," Noah admitted, no point denying what his brother could clearly see. "Good." Samuel smiled genuine approval in his expression. "You've been alone too long, Noah. We both have." The brass key that had hung around Noah's neck for 5 years now rested at the bottom of the creek that ran through his property, tossed there in a private ceremony of release, of forgiveness, of moving forward. The evidence it had protected was no longer needed. The truth had found other ways to emerge. As the brothers stood watching Sarah and Emma in the garden, the past receded like shadows before dawn. Not forgotten, never that, but no longer dominant, no longer defining. In its place grew something new, something tentative but strong, like the bulbs Sarah was planting, the promise of bloom after winter's darkness. The key to truth, Noah realized, had never been the physical object he'd carried for so long. It had been Emma's sight, Samuel's persistence, Sarah's courage, Cooper's quest for justice, and his own final willingness to open the door he'd kept locked for 5 long years. The truth had indeed burned away the lies, just as Emma had drawn in her prophetic art. And from those ashes, something new was rising, fragile, yet but growing stronger with each passing day.